Hi, everyone. This is Mamta Rodriguez. I am so excited to be here with you today and speaking to Professor Milliken and Fabio Luis. I run banking and financial services here at Teleperformance. Today, I have the privilege to moderate a conversation that's so relevant to all of us, to the paradigm change of what's happening after the pandemic at work at home and how people work in the future. Welcome, Professor Milliken. Welcome, Fabio, to the conversation, and excited and humbled to have you here today. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, everyone. I'm Professor Milliken. I'm a professor at the Stern School of Business at NYU, and I'm studying the transition to remote work.
Excellent.
Hello everyone, Fabio Luis, Global Head of Work at Home Solution at Performance, and I'm having the pleasure to drive the shift from office to remote. And I'm responsible to create a very strong solution to support our customer experience business working from remote. Hello everyone.
Thank you. So I'm going to jump right in. And obviously, everyone, we have so many participants that have joined this session. Everybody's curious, and there's no right answer. The exciting part is you guys are the leaders and a multitude of others of creating a new workplace for ourselves and the future individuals, such as my kids that are out there. So I'll jump right in with a question that, that's been pulsed and a lot of us have in mind. What has been the impact of the pandemic on employee preference for location? And what does the data show, right? We have obviously this hypothesis of what it really looks like, but what does the data state? And perhaps, Fabio, I can start with you on that one.
Well, that's a very good question for starting this discussion. I will not only refer to the pandemic, but also to the extended period we have been working from home. If you think, Manta, it passed already 2 years and a half, not only 1 month, 3 months, in fact, 2 years and a half. And what does it mean, in my opinion, that the town today knows exactly what to expect work from home. If you think back 2 years and a half ago, we moved people that were working mainly in the office 5 days per week, and we asked them to move to work in a people didn't have the proper home office setup, clear guidance about what does it really mean to work at home, and in some situations not even comfortable to turn on the camera as we are doing right now in this conversation. And obviously, people were concerned with their social lives. We all remember the times we were in our houses locked with a lot of people and our families working from home, and we were not really in some cases dealing with the fact of working from home. Today is completely different. People is comfortable to work from home. And to be honest with you, Mantha, complementary to the pandemic, a lot of things changed over the last 12, 18 months. We cannot deny that today we live in a very unpredictable environment, to be honest. We have a lot of external factors that also augment the appetite for people to work from home. If you think on the increase of prices in terms of oil, gas, housing, food, it means opportunity to save money for the people. Second, if you think how many days you used to commute to the office, let's assume you used to commute 300 times per year to the office, and daily you were investing 1 hour in commuting. Let's assume only 1 hour. About 12 days per year that we were investing just in commuting. What about having 12 extra holidays per year? This is definitely amazing. But coming to your question, for the second year in a row, we have conducted a survey in Teleperformance where we asked our employees what is their preferred location to work. Is it remote or is it office? And I tell you, the survey had 128,000 answers and more than 40 countries. And the data show that 74% of the respondents said they prefer to work exclusively from home, full time from home, and only 10% of the people prefer to work from the office. That last, like, there is also a very exciting fact around these analytics. When we compare the data versus the 2021 results, this year we had only 10% of the people preferring to work from the office. Last year, we had 22% of the people preferring to work from the office. So for me, this is definitely clear that the post-pandemic will be more flexible, more remote, and the employees have already turned the page to a new chapter. I have no doubt about that.
Wow. The statistics, those are eye-opening. I know focus group of one of myself and my husband, he was one that liked to go to the office. Maybe he didn't like to hang out with me. Kidding. But, now there's been a paradigm shift as well in his mindset of productivity, to your point, and where he himself has said, I'm so much more productive at home, and he's appreciating that. I'm going to turn it over to Professor Milliken. What have you seen, Professor, as results that, in your research? You're an SME in this space, and of course, conducting quite a bit of your own research and surveys, and I'd love to get your insight on this front.
Thank you, Mamta. Actually, the results I've seen are very similar to Fabio's. In one study we did, we found that about 85 to 90% of our respondents indicated they want to continue to work remotely. In another study we did, 94% of our respondents said that if they were given the choice, they would prefer to work remotely next year. And 78% of them said that they were extremely likely to prefer to work remotely. And anyone who's done survey research knows that to get 74% of respondents to say they're extremely likely to do anything is very rare. So they were all checking the top point on the scale, indicating that they were really very enthusiastic about working remotely. I would also note that our data suggests that women seem to want to work remotely more than men. And that women see the opportunity to work remotely as indicative of an organization that is more favorable towards diversity and inclusion. So for them, remote work signals something about an organization being sympathetic to issues around diversity and inclusion. And of course, there are a lot of concerns with having everyone work remotely, including, making sure that newcomers to the organization understand the culture of the organization, and that young people, have a chance to socialize in some way with their coworkers. So those are a couple of concerns that we should be thinking about.
That's a fair point. There's so many pros and cons of, working at home. I personally love it. I'm home right now. And, to your point, but we have a journey ahead of also how do companies, and this is my next question for both of you, is given the data and the dynamics and the desire by the employee base, after 2 years, have organizations made the necessary adjustments to create that remote, robust organizational environment and culture that's needed in the future state? And Professor Milliken, maybe I'll start with you because you were on that train of thought, and I'll hand it over to Fabio after that.
Okay, so I'm going to answer this question and then turn it right over to Fabio. And then if you want to come back to me, I'm happy to do that. I will say, I think this is a hard question to answer because we've only really had 2 years of working remotely. I'm not sure that we fully know what all the best practices are for managing a remote workforce. And after all, we had decades of managing people in an office, and it's not clear that we did that so well, even after decades of learning about managing offices. So I think we're at the beginning of a learning curve. I think most companies are at the beginning of a learning curve on some of these issues. And my sense is that teleperformance is probably out ahead on that learning curve and has a lot of lessons for other companies. So I turn it over to Fabio now to respond to that.
Thanks for that.
What lessons do you have?
And Fabio, before you respond, I'd love for you to also, in your response, think about some best practices that you've seen. And it could be also even at teleperformance, as Professor Milliken alluded to. But of course, you're SME internally looking across a multitude of fronts. And I'd love your thoughts on that as well.
No, for sure. I can add a few practices. And thanks, Professor Milliken, to acknowledge teleperformance is really leading and ahead of the curve. Really great to receive this from you. And the way I see it, Manta, to be honest, there is still some level of unclarity about how much companies will adopt work at home in the future, to be honest. I see statistics coming and rolling out every day, and they will certainly come in the next months. And now with the re-entry, we growing news about return to the office and see management trying to understand what could be the best setup for their organizations. A lot of things are still changing, I see it. Professor Milliken mentioned something very important, that is the new generations are the ones that are not really keen on working from home. They need to develop their social lives. The Z generation is already the largest generation we have in the market, more than 30%. Although there are some other factors like we know very well, metaverse is going to change, and we cannot deny the way we communicate in the virtual environment. Companies need, in other side, to embrace sustainability practices. Companies have been acknowledging that diversity is important. A lot of things are also changing. If we look at the news, 2 months ago, the Dutch Parliament approved a legislation that approved work at home as legal right for the employer. And all this pandemic, we still are in the inflection. So there are a lot of uncertainty. This is to say to you that as more companies take their decision to stay remote and how much portion of their employees will stay remote, as more they will invest in creating a very strong remote solution for their employees and for their clients. I saw a very good practice over the last 12 months, to be honest. And to be honest, security for me is the key topic when we work from home, and is my top advice for all companies that really want to stay remote. That is, protect their employees and their clients. And second, invest in understanding their employees. Make sure the employees are connected, having a strong collaborative setup. We have been denying in some reasons the fact that people is working from home and is basically staying at home, and we are not really providing the tools for them to get connected, talk with their managers, create the proper touch points with the employees. So this will be my second top advice. Create a very strong engagement program within your organization. And at last, understand that working from home is not sending people to work at home. There is a set of processes and a framework that support the work at home. And I still see companies need to invest more in creating a robust framework, a standard way of working from home in different verticals. So this will be my top 3 advice, for any organization that wants to keep some portion of their employees working from home.
I appreciate that. And I think this is a good segue to the next question that I had, because to your point, training, retaining talent, attracting the right talent. And, as my vertical is highly regulated with banking, ensuring that we have the technology in place in doing that. As we look at the next frontier of the future to work, and of course you've established the tenets of the 3 pillars already. Do you see trends generally past that you feel we need to double click on to develop employees remotely, and of course create an environment of engagement, especially as Professor Milliken alluded to, the individuals and employees that are starting in their career will need another level of engagement for social interaction, and also at any level of their careers, when you're new to a company, that interaction to feel as part of that company and that family. So a pretty big question of a few things, but I'll summarize it. Emerging techniques or trends that you're seeing successful that we need, especially when developing employees remotely.
Well, is when we are in the office, the engagement is definitely it happens by itself, right? When you are walking in the corridors, grabbing a coffee, you basically talk with a colleague of yours, and you start engaging in the morning. When you are working in a remote environment, the engagement has really to be intentional. You need to create those touch points for the employees to communicate. Couple of things obviously have been developed by several companies, and I see a couple of good practices, to be honest with you. One is 24/7 interaction with the company. So in the past, we used to go to the cabinets to get some support, administrative support, help desk support. Today, companies are creating channels where they can connect with employees 24/7. Then the sense of community. This was defined by the fact you were in the office. You create your own groups of connections. Companies that make a significant investment in creating social networks where the employees can interact between themselves. If you think we are in a home environment for 2.5 years, their employees never saw their peers in person, never went to the office. So there was a huge investment from the companies to create mechanisms where the people can interact between themselves. Because at the end of the day, work is also about family, about relations. Is a strong component for you to be in the company. It's a strong retaining component, and this has been growing across companies, creating employee communities, amongst others. But those will be for sure the top ones that have been developed by companies, and I see over the last 2 years. It's really create that sense of community and make sure that we are much more connected as company with employees 24/7 and paying more attention to the sentiment of the employees.
Yeah. Anything? I see you nodding, Professor Milliken. Something you want to add to that, or defer from as well, of course.
Well, one of the things I love that Fabio said that I've been thinking about myself is that managers need to be much more intentional about managing employees while working remotely. And that includes things like making sure to have one-on-one check-ins or meetings with employees so that they feel connected. But also there's been some interesting research about how people's work networks have gotten smaller over the course of working remotely versus when they worked in the office. And people are interacting more with people that they're working on project teams with and less with people who they're not on project teams with. But oftentimes creativity comes from interacting with people who you don't necessarily work with on a daily basis. And so I think companies need to think about how do you connect people who might not necessarily be on the same project team in order to get knowledge sharing and collaboration and innovation. So this is something that I think companies need to think a lot about, because before maybe some of these random interactions occurred at the water cooler or at the lunchroom or in a bar after work, but now they're not necessarily occurring so easily. And so managers need to think about, like, how do you do that? Like, who is it that you want someone to learn from, and how do you create that connection for people?
That's a very good topic, and if you allow me, Manta, other day I was having a very nice dinner with a friend of ours, and he was asking exactly this question, that creativity, you don't feel the creativity went down when we moved to home? And I said, no, completely the opposite. Today, I remember the old days where we were logged in an extension in a physical phone, hard phone, to get in a conference call to someone in the other side of the ocean. Today is much easier. Everyone is a click away. If you need any question about any specific topic, you just go directly in the collaborative tool you have in your organization and you jump directly. But it's up to the companies to create this environment, this DNA where people is part of the same organization, is putting down the geographic barriers we used to have in the past. And this is where companies need really to invest, removing the geographic barriers. When we can make this in our organizations, the impact is so huge. And to be honest with you, I feel this every day.
I agree. I mean, I joined Teleperformance right at the start of the pandemic. And one of the key reasons I joined, one was because Teleperformance was already ahead of the game for, I had a commute of over 2 hours in the past. So, this was much better. And the first year and a half, I was on virtual Zooms with everybody. But when I met Fabio, as an example, in person, it did not feel that I hadn't met him before. And that's, the power of technology. And I think, Professor Milliken, what you described on diversity earlier as well, wherein women are looking for more diverse environments. Generally, employees are looking for that as well. That's another avenue as we continue to stay in a hybrid or work at home environment where people find their passion in the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, amongst many others. And that's another avenue wherein that's a community in itself, right? That of friendships that you're going to make and where the creativity will be necessitated. And it takes it out of the day-to-day of work, which makes it very exciting. So I'm going to shift to my last question, or I have like a couple more, but I know we're probably going to run out of time. So this one is for Professor Milliken. There are many terms regarding the future of work, right? From great resignation, from great reshuffle, approaching 2023, there is a new awakening regarding what comes next in the future. What are the critical topics regarding the future of work?
Well, we did some interviews with knowledge workers, and we asked them questions about how they compared their current feelings about remote work to their past feelings about working in the office and what they came to realize about working in the office. And one of the things that we were struck by, there are several themes, and one of the themes that we were struck by is how people talked about how they now realize that working in the office, when they were working in the office, they were less productive. And the reason why was because offices are often filled with distractions and interruptions. And they felt that they didn't have the ability to concentrate and focus as much on their work. And they feel much more productive working from home than they were working from the office, which is an interesting thing. People now have the capacity to compare people who switched from working in the office to working remotely. And they recognized actually that they prefer working from home in part because of the fewer distractions and interruptions. Of course, that was not the case when children were not able to go to school and parents were very interrupted by their children at home. But now that children are back in school, this recognition is something that people talked about. Another theme that people talked about was how they have come to enjoy some new ways of combining their work and non-work lives. You know, in the past, we used to have to commute to an office, as Fabio said, at least now, most people, an hour a day or so. And then you worked from 9 to 5, and then you maybe went out for a drink or something, and then you came home to your family. But now in this new world, we get to combine work and non-work in some interesting and very novel ways. Like, for example, you could go walk your dog in the middle of the day, or, you know, you could pick up your children from school and then go back to work later. So people are really appreciating and grateful for some of the ways that they feel like their work-life balance has actually been improved by working remotely. So those are two things I would mention in particular. There are others, but I'll leave that for another time.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate the fluidity of the workplace as you described it as well, right? And the Venn diagram of things coming together, but allowing fluidity and where work is a component of life and part of the experience versus compartmentalizing work away from the rest of your life, which ultimately brings the best of the talent forward when you think about work in that way versus compartmentalizing work from home. Fabio, anything in addition you want to add to that question, or I'll pivot to another one?
No, I will just finish with something food for thought, to be honest, Manta. If we think we transition from office to remote in a matter of weeks, majority of organizations during the pandemic, we think today, we talked about several data points, people prefer to work from remote. And if we think in all the benefits it brings, and if we look at is ahead of us, the current atmosphere we are living, COVID-19 was for me just a wake-up call for the majority of organizations to think about the role of the office. Because for me, work at home will address specific problems we are having right now and we will have in the future. So before the pandemic was definitely how much companies choose to have work at home. Now, for me, the question is different, is how much remote work companies need to adopt to be competitive and to keep retaining talent.
I appreciate that, Fabio. Any closing remarks from you, Professor Milliken?
Well, I would second what Fabio just said. I think this is, you know, this is obviously a sea change for most companies in the transition to work from home. My hope is that we will take this opportunity to rethink how we work and how we design workplaces and jobs. To me, this is an enormous opportunity, and I hope we take advantage of it. And I really appreciate you asking me to join this call today. I've enjoyed this conversation.
I've appreciated both of you, trailblazers, and how we pivot. Personally, selfishly, I hope work from home remains. I absolutely love it, and my productivity level has leapfrogged ahead, so that's where my vote is. Of course, there's arguments otherwise, and I think the next year or two is going to be telling of what future looks like. I think the employees have spoken through the data that you've shared as well, and it's time for employers beyond across to say, all right, how do we make this work How do we engage a multitude of talent as well from a diversity perspective of those that are raising their hand and saying, I could stay in the workplace longer if there was more optionality for me and if I had that fluidity, as you alluded to as well. So I hear technology, I hear fluidity, I hear focus on talent and culture as the pillars and the tenets of work at home. And quite honestly, the right workplace that makes it a fun place to work. And I appreciate both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Have a nice day.
Thank you.